So, it's Sunday, October 22nd in Tucson, and this is my introductory video post to Facebook, basically to introduce myself to those people who want to know what the voice behind the words sounds like and what the face behind the fingers typing those words looks like. Well, it's a sunny day in Tucson, middle of the desert. That's why the sunglasses and the wide-brimmed hat. That's all you're going to get for right now. And this is one of my avatars, one of my alternate forms, and there's a reason for that. And we'll get into that later. But for right now, there are some people I wanted to acknowledge for encouraging me to do this. Anne and Diana and Lou, you know who you are. So by way of introduction, who am I anyway? And why am I doing this? My name is Wright. And I am doing this because I feel very strongly about the political situation in our country today. And not just our country, but because of our country, the ripples in the global lake, the storm-tossed waves that emanate from the mouth and other bodily orifices of Donald Trump. Specifically, in case some of you haven't been paying attention to the things I've posted, I believe that Donald Trump is an Adolf Hitler wannabe, a Saddam Hussein wannabe, a Bashar al-Assad wannabe, and most assuredly, a Vladimir Putin wannabe. The single characteristic that all of these people have in common is they're dictators. Most of them came to a bad end. I believe that Donald Trump will also come to a bad end, and he's going to drag the Republican Party down with him, as they deserve. I posted this morning on my timeline that I believe that Donald Trump, the Republican Party, the corporate paymasters, and the conservative conquistadores, who are all in league and in line with the Republican agenda, which Donald Trump is simply the front man for, the point man for, all have it in mind to destroy this country. And they have been trying to do that for well over 100 years. That has been their agenda. I'm not going to dwell on that right now, though, because, well, I already did in that post. So let me tell you something about myself. Until this past August, I was, operative word is, was, a candidate for Arizona Congressional District 2, currently held hostage by the Republican Party and their political puppet, Martha McSally. The Democratic Party of Pima County offered a 6-part candidates training session. It was a very valuable experience. It was a very useful experience. It was a very informative experience. I have no regrets about spending my money and using my time to go to that candidates training. There are a number of lessons I learned, which I posted somewhat metaphorically about on my timeline. You can find those, if you wish, by going back to June and July of this year. The reason I stopped being a candidate, the reason I ended my candidacy is threefold. First and foremost, politics is a money game, and it always has been, all the way back to George Washington. politics was a game that only people who already had a lot of money could play. And if they didn't have quite enough money in their own resources, they knew people who would give them more money. One of the things that we learned, was drilled into us actually by the candidates training, was that you have to have money in order to attract money. If you don't already have deep financial pockets, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to attract donors to your campaign, especially wealthy donors, but even, frankly, the average man, the middle-class donor. Basically, bottom line is, we may not like it, but politics in America is a money game. If you don't have money, like I said, you don't get to play. And honestly, I don't have money. I work a 40-hour job just like everybody else, or so many other people. I have bills to pay. I'm the only reliable wage earner in my household. So I'm not getting a whole lot of help from the other members of my household. I don't blame them for that. They have issues. They have challenges. They have disabilities that prevent them from working a full-time job. I don't. So it is my responsibility to be the primary wage earner in the household. I am not entirely happy with that, but it is what it is, and being unhappy is only going to make my state of mind even worse. So, first reason I suspended my campaign for Congressional District 2 is that I just don't have the money to carry it forward. Second reason is that in my conversations with the people who were conducting the training session, as well as from time to time, people who were a little higher up in the party organization than I was, were, shall we say, somewhat unnerved by my rhetorical style. One of the exercises that we had was to put ourselves in the place of our presumptive opposition, our presumptive opponent. We were to try to adopt their position on an issue which we ourselves did not personally agree with. Well, the other people in my class, nice people that they are, good, sincere, honorable people that they are, had evidently never done anything like that before. And they were not very convincing. Not only were they not convincing as their opponent, they weren't even convincing as themselves. Call it a boast, if you will. But I was the only one who was able to put myself into my opponent's head and speak the words that my erstwhile opponent would have said. And the other people in the class, including the instructors, class leaders, were troubled by that. After I made my statement as my opponent, there was shocked silence in the room for a good 20 seconds. Nobody said a thing, including the guy who was my presumptive campaign manager for the purposes of this exercise. Even he didn't know what to say. Neither did anybody else. I found that informative, because when people who are training us to be effective candidates have no response to what a hypothetical opposition candidate might say in response to us, you gotta wonder, how competent are they after all? How qualified are they after all to teach anybody how to be a successful candidate? They gave us a lot of facts about you got to have a campaign manager, and this is how a campaign has to be organized, and how it has to be financed, and how you have to do this, and you have to do that, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. That's all very good. And like I said, it's very valuable, and it was very worthwhile. It was very informative insights. But politics is not an intellectual exercise. It is gladiatorial combat in the modern age. It is down and dirty. And if you're not ready to roll up your sleeves and bloody your knuckles, either with your own blood or, if need be, with your opponent's blood, then you really don't belong in the race. Because politics, at any level, is not a sport for gentlemen. It just isn't. Or gentlewomen. So anyway, because I did not get the kind of encouragement, because I did not get the kind of support that I was hoping for and expecting from the party, including, oh, by the way, the chairman of the Pima County Democratic Party, who never once showed up or put in an appearance in any of our training sessions, which is also beyond odd. It is worrisome. I mean, here are a bunch of people. There were 12 of us in the class. We were all aspiring candidates to either Congressional District 2 or Legislative District 10 or Legislative District 14 or whatever. There were a couple of people there who were thinking about running for governor. One of whom I actually like. I think he's got a pretty good chance as long as he gets support from the party. And that worries me because I don't think he's going to get the kind of support from the party that he needs. I don't think any candidate is going to get the kind of support from the Pima County Democratic Party that they need to actually win. And that is reason number 2 why I dropped out of the campaign. Reason number 3, and this I think is actually the most important reason. It occurred to me that if I were to run against Martha McSally and beat her, and pardon my confidence, my towering overconfidence, but I know I can beat her. I can beat her on the issues. I can beat her on her record. I can beat her on her temperament. I can beat her 6 ways from Sunday, any way you look at it. So why don't I run against her? Even in spite of a lack of support from the Pima County Democratic Party or Pima County Democrats in general, because I realized I actually have a higher agenda, a larger agenda, a greater agenda than simply being representative from Congressional District 2. Let me explain. It occurred to me that if I were elected and take office in January of 2019 along with everybody else in Congress, I would have to start from day one a campaign, a different electoral campaign, not just to be reelected, but for a higher office than that. Not United States Senator, but for President. I want to beat Donald Trump to a pulp, figuratively, sometimes even literally. But if I'm running for president from day one of January 2019, I have to spend the first year getting my campaign organized. I have to spend the second year, 2020, which would be an election year anyway, campaigning not for Congressional District 2, but for President of the United States. That's not fair. And it's not truthful. And it's not honest to the people of Congressional District 2. Because during the campaign, I would have promised them, I'll be there for you. I'm going to be your advocate. Well, if I'm busy campaigning for president from the moment I take the oath of office to be Congressional District 2 representative, then I'm not being honest. I'm not going to do that. That's not how I want to run my campaign. That is how some people would run their campaign. That's not me. So, I came to the realization that this is not the best campaign for me. And there were other factors as well. Lesser factors. I will mention them only for the record. First reason is that I believe the Pima County Democratic Party is comfortable with the notion of Martha McSally being a long-term, multi-term incumbent in Congressional District 2. That's the way it is in Pima County. That's the way it has been in Pima County since the 1960s, when Mo Udall was the last Democrat to serve many terms as representative from Congressional District 2. Mo Udall finally retired for health reasons and died a couple years later. I think it was Hodgkin's or something like that. He was in his 70s at the time. After Mo Udall retired, a gentleman by the name of McNulty, Dennis McNulty, I believe, was elected. He served one term and decided he didn't want to do this anymore. His successor was Jim Colby, a Republican, who served 20 years as Republican representative from Congressional District 2. 20 years Jim Colby represented Congressional District 2. And in most of those 20 years, the Democratic Party did not even try, really, to unseat him. They put up candidates who were lackluster at best, who were insipid on their best day. The Democratic Party of Pima County didn't really want to defeat Jim Colby. Finally, Jim Colby decided he'd had enough after 20-something years, so he retired. The Pima County Democratic Party got behind Gabrielle Giffords. She was the one. She was our hero. She's going to be the one who will move Congressional District 2 forward. And for a while she did. Until she got shot. Along with 6 other people. Including a 9-year-old girl. So, a special election was held. Because obviously Gabrielle Giffords can't effectively serve and recuperate from her wounds. So they ran her campaign manager, Ron Barber, as the temporary candidate. He won, not surprisingly, mostly on sympathy. And then after that, he ran on his own, and he won. Again, mostly on sympathy, but because he had a strong message and a strong platform and a strong campaign. Martha McSally ran against him for the first time there, at that time. Not surprisingly, she lost. Second time, when Ron Barber ran for re-election, he lost by a very slim margin. Martha McSally won by that same slim margin. And to be honest with you, much as I like and respect Ron Barber, his campaign was disappointing. He ran on basically 2 issues. Now, I have heard from people close to the Barber campaign that he had more than just 2 issues that he was strong on. But the Democratic Party was only willing to back him on 2 issues: health care and border protection. Martha McSally won by a very slim margin and 3 recounts. The next time Martha McSally ran for re-election, the Democrats ran a local Tucson physician, an obstetrician if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but an obstetrician. His big issue was, not surprisingly, health care. But because he was also a practicing physician, he had his medical practice. He didn't have time to campaign as effectively as he needed to. He had the money. The problem was not campaign funds. The problem was he simply didn't have time to campaign. And the Democratic Party was okay with that. And Martha McSally won re-election handily. So now, in 2016, Martha McSally runs again. And she wins even more handily because Donald Trump is everybody's surprise Führer, creating a Führer all along the way. Well, then people decided that by golly, we got to get ourselves organized, and we got to defeat Donald Trump, and we got to defeat his agenda, and we got to beat Republicans left and right, and that includes, in Arizona, Congressional District 2. So in January, I made my intentions known to the Democratic Party of Pima County, told them this is what I want to do, and this is why. And they said, great, fine, wonderful, terrific, glad to have you. Yeah, well, by June of this year, not so much. And I took the candidates training and learned a lot of very important and valuable things, and then came to the realization, as I've already mentioned, that this really is not the best office for me. I'm not going to rehash that. I've already stated that. So, where are we now on this bright, sunny October morning in Tucson? Well, I'm introducing myself. I'm telling you where I've been. I mentioned my ambition is to be the President of the United States. This is not just a simple spur-of-the-moment thing. This is something that I've been contemplating since 1976, when Jimmy Carter was elected. Jimmy Carter's a fine man, wonderful man, but he just didn't have the temperament to be a good president. And everybody in the country knew that. Everybody knew that. And although Jimmy Carter did his democratic duty and ran for re-election, even he didn't really want to be re-elected. His heart wasn't in it, and everybody could tell. So Ronald Reagan was elected. The great Republican Messiah that they had been waiting 100 years to elect. Well, Ronald Reagan was an idiot. Nice guy. Very personable, very affable, everybody's favorite next-door neighbor. Problem is, Ronald Reagan had the political acumen of a carrot. And it was George Herbert Walker Bush, Daddy Bush, Bush 41, his vice president, who was the real acting president. Ronald Reagan was just the front guy. George W. Bush was the power behind the throne. Or maybe I should say the power behind Nancy. But anyway. So my point is, I have been thinking about this for 40 years. 40 years I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about it in depth on political issues. What would be the best course of action with Israel? The best course of action with North Korea? The best course of action with regard to energy and the environment and civil rights and taxes, and the list goes on. I'm not just some spur-of-the-moment wannabe. I've been thinking about this for 40 years. And I think my thoughts have worth. I think my insights have worth. I think I have worth. And I know that I would be a better candidate than anybody in the Democratic Party could put up against Martha McSally. I know that I could be a stronger candidate than anybody in the Democratic National Committee is going to come up with. I like Elizabeth Warren, but she doesn't want to be president. I like Bernie Sanders, but he's a dreamer, an idealist. And that's fine. This nation was built by dreamers and idealists. But Bernie Sanders just doesn't have what it takes. Because Bernie Sanders only has two issues. The economy and the economy. Well, it's all well and good to have a thriving, prosperous economy, but what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to get it there? Free college tuition? It's a wonderful pie-in-the-sky idea, but it's not going to work. Infrastructure. Everybody, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, agree that we need to rebuild our national infrastructure. But you can't just agree on the idea. You have to have a plan. And are you going to just simply repair everything that's falling down? Or are you going to move forward and design and build something new, something modern, something suitable to the demands of the 21st century? Yeah, well, there hasn't been much discussion of that. What about the space program? This is the one area that I blame Barack Obama for the most. That was a failing. Barack Obama decided that we couldn't afford to keep going with a fully up-to-date, up-to-state-of-the-art manned space program. The International Space Station is fine. We built it, most of it. And as long as we've got an astronaut or two, or maybe three, on the International Space Station, oh, that's okay. That's fine. Bullshit. But the thing is, no other president since Lyndon Johnson has advocated anything, any kind of growth or expansion, and done something about it for the American space program. Let me say, somewhat parenthetically, if you will, that of all the programs, massive programs, that the United States government has undertaken since the end of World War II, the interstate highway system, racial justice, social justice, and civil rights, of all of the programs, the one that has been the most successful, the most prosperous, and has achieved the greatest level of national support, public support, across the board, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, progressive, whatever, the space program stands alone. It cost the American taxpayer $24 billion. And by the way, those are 1960s dollars to put Neil Armstrong on the moon. Those $24 billion in return generated millions of jobs and generated billions more in revenue for the United States government. It was the most successful public employment, public works, public anything program, public morale building. It is in many ways the 1960s equivalent of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs. But that's all done. Every president since Richard Nixon has spoken of, and next we're going to Mars. Even Donald Trump said something about, we're going to Mars. Yeah, well, nobody believes Donald Trump except the people who drink his yellow Kool-Aid. Served warm and fresh daily. Just stand in line for it. Or maybe I should say kneel in line for it. Anyway. I would be a much better president than congressman. But I'm not going to go on about that right now. I just wanted to basically introduce myself, tell you who I am, tell you something about myself, and what my long-term goals are, what my agenda is. And oh, by the way, yes, about this dragon. There's a reason for that. And I'm not going to go into detail right now because you'll find that out soon enough on your own. But I wanted to assure everybody who's watching, I am not some deranged, demented, delusional demagogue. Neither am I a dedicated, docile, devoted dogmatist for the Democrats. I hold the Democrats as much to blame for Donald Trump as I do the Republicans. Well, almost as much to blame as the Republicans. I will be speaking more on this in coming interviews. And yes, I do want to have an interview. I want to hear back from the people who watch this. I expect questions. I invite questions. I am not intimidated by debate. If you don't agree with what I've said, if you don't like what I've said, fine. I don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, I kind of expect it. I'm hoping that a lot of people actually will reply. It would be nice if most of them say, great job, Chris, wonderful, well said, I'm behind you. But you know what? If a lot of people say, you are crazy, what do you think you're doing? How are you going to make this work? How are you going to make that work? What is your program? What is your plan? What is your agenda for this issue or that issue or some other issue? I got answers. I got answers. And the thing is, it is in debate, reasonable, civilized, intellectual, scholarly debate that progress is made and compromise is reached and solutions are found. So if you agree with me, that's fine. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine too. Because what we need to have is open, even-handed debate in this country, now more than ever. And that being said, I think I've said enough for now. So I'm going to push the button at the bottom of my phone and say only, until next time.